There is a coal mine on the west coast of New Zealand that the government has sealed shut forever. 29 men are still inside it. Their families know exactly where their bodies are. They have photographs taken by robots and boreholes. They have the names, the ages, the lunchboxes still sitting in the changing rooms. And yet, no one is ever going in to bring them home. There is an island in the Bay of Plenty where 47 people stood on a crater floor one summer afternoon in 2019. 22 of them never left. The island is still venting toxic gas. Tour boats no longer approach it. Helicopters do not land. And there is a military zone in the center of the North Island so vast and so saturated with unexploded ordnance that 63,000 hectares of tussock country have been effectively erased from the map. You can drive past it on the highway. You cannot enter it. New Zealand sells itself to the world as 100% pure. Clean rivers, empty beaches, friendly faces. But scattered across the country's 268,000 square kilometers are places the government, the iwi, and biology itself have sealed off forever. Some you can fly over, some you can glimpse from a boat at a safe distance. Most you will only ever see in photographs taken by people who were never supposed to be there. We are counting down 15 forbidden places in New Zealand you will never be able to see. We are starting with the 3 that hurt the most. Number 15, Pike River Mine, West Coast, South Island. Ground Zero is a concrete portal set into a hillside 46 kilometers northeast of Greymouth. It is 3:44 p.m. on the 19th of November, 2010. 31 men are underground. A methane explosion tears through the workings at the speed of a freight train. 2 of them stagger out of the access tunnel 2 hours later, ash-faced, hearing nothing. 29 do not. Over the next 9 days, 3 more explosions shake the valley. The mine becomes a sealed crime scene. The bodies are 2.2 kilometers inside, beyond a roof fall that no one is allowed to cross. For more than a decade, families fought to get inside. Robots were sent in. 5 of them failed. Boreholes were drilled. Cameras lowered. In 2017, leaked images showed what had been suppressed for years. At least 2 bodies lying near a piece of equipment called the Alpin bolt miner, exactly where they had been working. In 2021, against the explicit wishes of most of the families, the Labour government permanently sealed the mine. The recovery operation had cost roughly 51 million New Zealand dollars and had only entered the drift tunnel. The mine workings where the men actually died were never examined. Picture yourself standing at the gate on the Aotearoa Road today. There is a memorial. 29 names cut into stone. Beyond the memorial, a road leads up into the bush. The road ends at a concrete plug. On the other side of that plug, in the dark, in the gas-thick silence, the helmets are still in their charging docks. The signs about safety still hang on the walls. A pair of boots sits where someone took them off on the morning of November 19, 2010, expecting to put them back on at the end of his shift. That is forbidden ground. It will remain forbidden forever. Number 14, the Waiouru Military Training Area, Central North Island. Drive south from Lake Taupo on State Highway 1 and the landscape goes flat and gray. Tussock, wind, the desert road. To your east, for almost 40 kilometers of driving, lies the largest restricted military zone in the country. 63,000 hectares of Crown land acquired by the Army in the 1930s and never given back. This is where every New Zealand soldier completes basic training. It is also where, since the 1980s, the Singapore Army has been firing 155mm howitzers under a Memorandum of Understanding with Wellington. On the 9th of March, 1997, one of those howitzer rounds detonated inside the barrel of the gun. 2 Singaporean servicemen, 3rd Sergeant Ronnie Tan Han Chong, age 22, and Lance Corporal Lo Yin Tit, age 21, were killed instantly. 12 others were injured. The ground here is saturated. Unexploded ordnance, decades of artillery impacts, live fire ranges still in daily use. Imagine the sound of the wind crossing the Rangipo Desert. Now imagine that wind passing over the rusted silhouettes of tank targets, over scoria churned by tracked vehicles, over the wreckage of practice rounds buried half a meter down. You cannot walk here. You cannot drive here. You cannot fly here without permission. This is not wilderness. This is engineered emptiness. Number 13, Whakaari/White Island, Bay of Plenty. Ground Zero is a yellow-stained crater floor, 48 kilometers off the coast of Whakatane on the 9th of December 2019 at 2:11 p.m. The volcano, which had been monitored at alert level 2 for weeks, releases a phreatic eruption that lasts approximately 2 minutes. 47 people are on the island. 22 of them die. Most were passengers from the cruise ship Ovation of the Seas on a sightseeing excursion that morning. The island had been a privately owned scenic reserve since 1953. Tourists had been walking that crater floor for decades. After the eruption, that ended. Access has been banned ever since. The volcano has continued to erupt episodically, most recently venting sulfur dioxide and ash through 2024. And scientists who once monitored the island in person now do so almost entirely from the mainland. If you were to fly over Whakaari today, you would see the skeletal remains of the tour group's path, the yellow sulfur, the gray ash, the husks of equipment left where they fell. The eruption ended a 66-year experiment in volcano tourism in 2 minutes. And those are only the first 3. It gets worse from here. Before we go any further, a question. What does a country do when an entire species, older than the dinosaurs, found nowhere else on Earth, has been pushed onto a handful of rocks barely visible on a map? The answer is that you close those rocks. You close them completely. You write laws so strict that even tying a boat to a mooring without permission is a criminal offense. You station rangers. You strip search every visitor for hitchhiking seeds and rat droppings. And you accept that for most of the people of New Zealand, these islands will only ever exist as photographs on a Department of Conservation website. The next 3 places are the most heavily restricted nature reserves in the country. Together, they hold almost every surviving tuatara on Earth. Number 12, North Brother Island, Cook Strait. North Brother is a single jagged rock, 4 hectares, that is smaller than a suburban block of flats. It rises 66 meters straight out of one of the most dangerous stretches of water in the southern hemisphere, the eastern entrance to Cook Strait, where the Tasman Sea and the Pacific Ocean grind against each other in tide rips that have sunk ships for 200 years. A wooden lighthouse was first lit here in September 1877. It was the only rock station in New Zealand, meaning there was no land around it, no village, no escape. Just the keepers, their families, and the sea. The posting was so bleak that lighthouse keepers were said to go what was called rock happy. One keeper insisted his family use the metal box that was winched up and down the cliff face from the supply boat. He himself was so terrified of the box, he preferred to cling to the side of a goods net. The lighthouse was automated in March 1990. The last 4 keepers, Tim Watson, Ian Hargreaves, Bill McGinnis, and Charlie Wills, were withdrawn. Their houses were emptied, and the island was handed over to a tenant that did not need windows or doorways. North Brother holds the entire global wild population of the Brothers Island tuatara, a species so distinct it was classified separately from its mainland cousins. Picture yourself standing at the old landing today. The wooden tower still operates, powered by solar panels. The keepers' quarters are gone. The wind moves through bracken, and in the burrows beneath your feet, animals that have not meaningfully evolved since the age of the dinosaurs are waiting for the temperature to drop. You will never stand there. The island is a restricted access wildlife sanctuary. Permits are issued only to Department of Conservation staff and approved researchers. No public visits. Not now. Not ever. Number 11, Stevens Island/Takapurawa, Marlborough Sounds. Stevens Island is bigger, 154 hectares, but the access rules are no less absolute. Permits only. Entry to the tower is forbidden. Even tying a boat alongside requires written permission. Ground zero for the modern story of this island is the year 1894. A wooden lighthouse had just been completed on the summit, 183 meters above the sea. The keepers brought cats, the cats bred. And somewhere in that first year, a small, flightless songbird called Lyle's wren, known nowhere else on Earth, vanished. The local legend says a single cat named Tibbles wiped the species out by herself. The truth, as later researchers established, is uglier. A pregnant cat was brought to the island in 1894. By the time anyone realized what was happening, the island was, in the words of one of the keepers, swarming with cats. The forest, which had been cleared by the keepers to graze sheep, was gone. So was the wren. So was the piopio, with what 19th century naturalists called the most melodious song of any New Zealand bird. So was the saddleback. The keepers were eventually paid bounties to shoot the cats. The last feral cat was killed in 1925. Today, Takapurewa holds an estimated 30,000 tuatara, possibly the densest reptile population on the planet, with up to 2,500 animals per hectare in places. It is also home to Hamilton's frog, which some researchers believe is the rarest amphibian in the world. Imagine walking the summit ridge here at dusk. The wooden lighthouse still flashes once every 6 seconds, one of the most powerful lights in the country, visible 33 kilometers out to sea. The ground beneath you is honeycombed with seabird burrows. Step wrong and you punch through into a tuatara nest. The wind never stops. There is no quiet on this island. There is only the noise of a million seabirds and the steady mechanical pulse of a light that nobody is there to tend. You will never walk that ridge. The 1989 automation of the light, one of the last in New Zealand, was the end of human habitation. The 1997 reclassification as a full nature reserve was the end of human access. Number 10. Te Hauturu-o-Toi / Little Barrier Island, Hauraki Gulf. Hauturu rises 722 meters almost vertically out of the sea, 80 kilometers north of Auckland. On a clear day, you can see it from the city. You can sail to within a few hundred meters of its boulder beaches. You cannot land. This was New Zealand's first nature reserve, declared on the 26th of September, 1895. To make that reserve, the Crown enacted the Little Barrier Island Purchase Act of 1894 and forcibly removed the resident Ngatiwai families, including the chiefs Wiremu Te Heru Tenatahi and Rāhui Te Kiri, by a party of officials, police, and soldiers in 1896. In 2011, the Crown settled treaty claims with local iwi. The island was returned to its traditional owners. The iwi then gifted it back to the people of New Zealand. But the people of New Zealand, in this case, means a rotating crew of conservation staff, a few scientists, and the occasional approved volunteer. Everyone else is locked out. Roughly 40 species of rare or endangered birds live on the island, 14 species of reptile, 2 species of bat, more than 400 native plants. A 2004 aerial bait drop removed Pacific rats from the island. Feral cats were eradicated between 1977 and 1980 in what was at the time New Zealand's costliest pest control program. Kakapo were returned to the island in 2012. And in August 2024, the situation tightened further. Exotic caulerpa seaweed was discovered on the island's coast. Biosecurity New Zealand issued a controlled area notice. Anchoring within 40 meters of depth around the entire coastline became illegal. The local iwi, Ngati Manuhiri, placed a rāhui, a sacred prohibition, over the same waters. Picture yourself in a boat off the eastern shore. The cliffs rise vertical and green. The cradle of a beach is empty. You cannot drop anchor. You cannot step out of the boat. You can only listen. And what you hear, faintly, carried on the wind off Mount Hauturu, is the sound of birds that exist almost nowhere else on Earth. Coming up next, the islands you are not even allowed to fly over. There is a parrot in New Zealand that cannot fly. It is nocturnal. It is moss green, so it looks like a forest floor when it freezes. It can live to be 90 years old. It is the heaviest parrot on Earth. And there are only 242 of them left. Every single one has a name. Every single one has a radio transmitter. Every single one lives on an island so heavily restricted that the staff who work there are screened more thoroughly than passengers boarding an international flight. The next 3 places are the most carefully guarded ecosystems in the country. 2 are predator-free islands holding the last of a species. The third is a lake that drowned the 8th wonder of the world. Number 9, Waitakere/Codfish Island, off Stewart Island. Waitakere sits about 3 kilometers west of Rakiura, Stewart Island, in the cold currents of Foveaux Strait. The name translates to New Land. It is a fitting name because everything that lives on the island is a refugee. Ground zero for the modern story of this island is the year 1987. That was when the first kakapo were transferred here from Stewart Island, where feral cats were systematically wiping them out. The total kakapo population at that point was a few dozen birds. Today, after decades of intensive management, the global population stands at around 242. Waitakere holds the largest concentration of them on the planet. The island is also a refuge for mohua, the yellowhead, for the Waitakere diving petrel, which breeds nowhere else, for the Codfish Island fernbird, for the South Island saddleback, for Campbell Island teal brought here from another island so isolated it has its own marine reserve. To get to Waitakere, a researcher must pass through a quarantine room. Bags are opened, pockets are emptied. Every seam of every piece of clothing is inspected for stowaway seeds, for rodent droppings, for any organism that should not be there. Food is sealed in rodent-proof containers. Boots are scrubbed. Rats were eradicated from the island in 1998. The conservation staff have built their entire careers around making sure rats never come back. Picture yourself on the deck of the supply boat as it anchors offshore. You can see the pebble beach. You can see the dunes covered in pingao. You can see the dark line of rimu forest rising behind. You will not set foot on it. The island is closed to the public absolutely. There is no ferry. There is no tour. There is no permit available for recreation. Every person who lands on Waitakere is there because the survival of an entire species depends on what they are about to do. Number 8. Te Pakeka/Maud Island, Marlborough Sounds. Te Pakeka is 320 hectares of hilly green ground in the middle of Pelorus Sound. The Maori name predates European settlement by centuries. The English name dates from 1867, when the Crown granted ownership to a farmer named John Gibson, who cleared most of the forest for pasture. For the first 100 years of its colonial history, Te Pakeka was a sheep farm. Then, in 1971, the owner Jack Shand gifted part of the island to the Crown. In 1974, he agreed to host what was believed at the time to be the last kakapo from Fiordland. That single bird made Maud Island the first kakapo sanctuary anywhere in the world. By 2000, there were 18 kakapo here. In 2003, the last 5 were transferred to better forested islands. Today, Te Pakeka is a closed scientific reserve. Private boats, kayaks, jet skis, paddleboards, swimmers, none may land. The only exceptions are conservation researchers, weed control crews, and a handful of specially permitted commercial trips during January each year. The island is the main stronghold for the Maud Island frog, Leiopelma pakeka, a creature so rare that the entire global wild population fits comfortably on this one piece of land. It is one of only 4 sites for the southern striped gecko, one of New Zealand's rarest reptiles. Cook Strait giant weta were translocated here from Mana Island in 1977. Imagine walking the gravel track that runs along the spine of the island. To your north, you can see the remains of a Second World War gun emplacement, a concrete bunker, and the range-finding equipment slowly being reclaimed by bracken. The military left in 1945. The sheep left in 1975. The kakapo moved on in 2003. What is left is the silence of a place where the only sounds are weta at night and the wind off the sound by day. You will never walk that track. Even tying a boat to the old wartime jetty requires a permit. Number 7. The Pink and White Terraces beneath Lake Rotomahana. Ground Zero is a moment, not a place. It is the early hours of the 10th of June, 1886. Mount Urewera on the central North Island splits open along a 17-kilometer rift. The rift runs through the mountain, through the lake, and out into the Waimangu Valley beyond. The eruption ejects approximately 0.5 cubic kilometers of mud, ash, and rock. It buries the village of Te Wairoa. It kills more than 100 people, almost all of them local Maori. And it obliterates what colonial New Zealand had called the 8th natural wonder of the world, the Pink and White Terraces. Before the eruption, the terraces were two enormous siliceous staircases of pale pink and pale white sinter descending into the old Lake Rotomahana from geothermal springs. The water at the top was hot enough to scald. The water at the bottom was the color, according to one visitor, of a blue seen nowhere else in nature. People crossed oceans to see them. Tourists traveled from London, from New York, from Sydney, simply to spend an afternoon bathing on those terraces. To the Tuhurangi and Ngati Rangitihi iwi, who lived on the lake, the terraces were a taonga, a treasure. After the eruption, the old lake was gone. In its place was a crater more than 100 meters deep, which slowly filled over the following years to become the new, larger Lake Rotomahana. Today, up to 118 meters deep in places. For 140 years, scientists have argued about what happened to the terraces. Some believe they were entirely destroyed in the blast. Others, citing a forgotten 1859 survey by the geologist Ferdinand von Hochstetter, believe fragments of one or both may still survive, buried 10 to 15 meters underground on the northwestern shore. Sonar studies in 2011 suggested traces of the pink terraces still lie at the bottom of the lake. Picture yourself standing on the shore of the new Lake Rotomahana today. The water is geothermally heated. Steam rises from the surface in patches. There is no jetty. There is no diving allowed. The lake is part of the Waimangu Volcanic Valley Reserve, and the area where the terraces once stood is considered Wahi Tapu by the iwi, a place of the dead. More than 100 people are buried beneath that water. Their descendants do not want it disturbed. The 8th wonder of the world is down there somewhere. No one will ever bring it back up. Coming up, 3 places where the prohibition is not biological. It is spiritual. There is a kind of forbidden activity that has nothing to do with explosives, volcanoes, or critically endangered birds. It is older than any of those things. It is the forbidden of tapu, the Maori word for sacred, untouchable, set apart. When a place is tapu, you do not enter. You do not eat there. You do not stand in the wrong spot. You do not test the rule. The next 3 places are not closed by fences. They are closed by something far older, and in some ways, far stronger. Number 6. The summit of Taranaki Maunga. Taranaki Maunga is a 2,518-meter stratovolcano on the western coast of the North Island. It is one of the most photographed mountains in the country. From the right angle, on the right day, it is a perfect cone, snow-capped, rising out of a ring of dark green forest exactly 9.6 kilometers from its summit. The boundary of Egmont National Park, drawn as a circle in 1881. Captain Cook named it Mount Egmont. The local iwi never called it that. To the 8 iwi of Taranaki, Te Atiawa, Ngati Mutunga, Ngati Tama, Taranaki iwi, Ngati Maru, Ngaruahine, Ngati Ruanui, and Ngarauru Katahi, the mountain is a tupuna, an ancestor, a living being. The summit is its head. In 2017, the New Zealand government signed a record of understanding acknowledging the mountain's status as a legal person. In 2025, that was formalized through Te Pire Wakatupua mo Te Kahui Tupua, a law granting the mountain its own legal personality. To harm the mountain is now, in legal terms, equivalent to harming a person. You can still climb Taranaki. The Department of Conservation maintains the summit track from North Egmont, but standing directly on the summit peak is a transgression. Camping there is a transgression. Cooking there is a transgression. Going to the toilet anywhere near the summit is a transgression. The Department of Conservation's official guidance does not say, please. It says, do not stand on the summit. Picture yourself 2 kilometers above sea level, the wind cutting at 30 knots, the crater of an old eruption opening below your feet. You are standing on the head of an ancestor. The mountaineers who come this way now stop a few meters short of the true peak. They take their photograph. They turn around. Below them, on a clear day, they can see the entire ring of forest, and beyond it, the dairy country that was confiscated from the Taranaki iwi in 1865, land they are still in negotiation to recover. Number 5. The closed forest of the Waitakere Ranges. The Waitakere Ranges sit immediately west of Auckland. For decades, they were the city's lung, 16,000 hectares of native bush threaded with walking tracks, popular with weekend trampers, runners, and 1 million annual visitors. Ground zero for the closure of this forest is December 2017. The local iwi, Te Kawarau-Amaki, placed a rāhui, a cultural prohibition, over the entire forest, which they call Te Waunui-o-Tiriwa. The reason was a microscopic water mold called Phytophthora agathidicida. Kauri D-back disease. New to science, no cure, fatal. The numbers are terrifying. A 2018 survey found the disease had spread to roughly 19% of kauri trees in the Waitakere Ranges, up from 8% only 5 years earlier. The spore can survive in dried soil, a single pinhead of mud on a boot, for at least 8 years. There is no known way to stop the disease once it enters a forest. The only defense is to keep human feet out. In May 2018, Auckland Council formally closed most of the forested area. Trespassers face prosecution under the Public Safety and Nuisance Bylaw. In 2021, a West Auckland man named Damon Gojak was convicted, fined 4,500 New Zealand dollars, and ordered to pay court costs after he was caught on CCTV repeatedly walking the closed Karamatura Valley track. Imagine the Hillary Trail today. Once a 77-kilometer walking route through the heart of the ranges, now a broken chain of locked gates and weathered rāhui signs. The kauri here are dying. Some are already dead, standing in the bush as skeletal gray towers with no foliage. The iwi have asked that they be left where they fell. Cutting them up would release millions of spores. If you were to walk one of the closed tracks today, in defiance of everything, you would hear something the residents of the western suburbs have noticed since the rāhui began. The forest is louder with wild pigs than it has been in living memory. With humans gone, the pigs have taken back the ground. Their rooting under kauri roots may well be spreading the disease faster than human boots ever did. Science is contested. The closure remains. Number 4. Te Urewera. Te Urewera is 212,000 hectares of rugged, mist-covered forest in the eastern North Island. For most of the 20th century, it was Te Urewera National Park. It was also the ancestral home of Ngai Tuho, an iwi whose treaty grievances with the Crown stretch back to the 19th century land confiscations and the brutal scorched earth campaigns against Te Kuti's followers in the 1860s and 1870s. In 2014, as part of Tuho's treaty settlement, something remarkable happened. The Te Urewera Act gave the former national park its own legal personality. Te Urewera became a legal person. Not Crown land, not iwi land, but itself. It is governed by the Te Urewera Board, on which Tuho holds a majority of seats. In August 2021, the board closed Te Urewera entirely. The reason given was the arrival of the Delta variant of COVID-19 in New Zealand and the need to protect vulnerable rural communities, many of which had vaccination rates well below the national average. The closure included Lake Rotomahana, one of the country's 9 Great Walks. A tractor was parked across the boat ramp. Signs were nailed to trees. The lake reopened in February 2022. Then, in February 2023, Cyclone Gabrielle tore through the eastern North Island. The Waitakere Great Walk was so badly damaged that it remained closed for another 11 months. It finally reopened on the 10th of January 2024. Picture yourself driving the road from Murupara towards Lake Waitakere today. The road has been repaired in places. In other places, it has not. The forest crowds the verge. There are sections of Te Urewera, particularly in the deep interior of the Urewera Ranges, where the tracks have been allowed to revert. The huts that once sat at the end of those tracks are no longer maintained. The Toho Iwi have made it clear. This is not a national park anymore. Access is on their terms. Some places you will not be invited back to. The next three are the most isolated of them all. Everything we have counted down so far has been on the mainland or close to it. The final three places are different. The first is the spiritual edge of New Zealand, the point at which, according to Maori belief, the souls of the dead leave this world. The second is the last land those souls see. And the third is a chain of islands so remote that the people who lived there were almost all shipwreck survivors who never asked to be there. Number 3. Te Reinga Wairua, Cape Reinga. Cape Reinga is the northwestern tip of the Opari Peninsula, more than 100 kilometers beyond the nearest town of Kaitaia. In Maori, Te Reinga Wairua means the leaping off place of spirits. Reinga is the word for the underworld. Both names refer to the same belief. This is where the souls of the Maori dead leave Aotearoa to return to Hawaii, the ancestral homeland. According to tradition, the spirits travel north along a sacred pathway called Te Ara Wairua. At Cape Reinga, they climb down the roots of a gnarled pohutukawa tree clinging to the cliff face. That tree is believed to be more than 800 years old. It has never been recorded to bloom the bright red flowers its species is famous for. The spirits descend through the roots, enter the sea, and travel underwater to the Three Kings Islands. There, they climb out, take one last look back at the land, and then continue on to Hawaii forever. Cape Reinga is not closed in the legal sense. You can drive there. State Highway 1 ends at the car park. There is a lighthouse built in 1941, still operating. Around 500,000 people visit each year. But the area beyond the car park is wahi tapu of the highest order, and the tikanga, the cultural protocol, is absolute. You may not eat any food at Cape Reinga. You may drink water, but you may not eat. You may not bury or scatter ashes there. You may not camp. You may not touch the pohutukawa tree. You may not climb down to it. In 2007, after sustained protests from local iwi about tourists eating sandwiches and discarding rubbish on the spirit pathway, the Department of Conservation moved the entire visitor facility further back from the Cape at a cost of 6.5 million New Zealand dollars. The road was sealed for the first time in 2010. Picture yourself standing on the boardwalk above the lighthouse on a windy afternoon. To your left, the Tasman Sea. To your right, the Pacific Ocean. The two oceans collide in a foaming standing wave below the cliff. The pohutukawa is there, a single dark twist of branches on the rock face, somehow alive after 8 centuries. You are looking at it from above. You will never get any closer. No one will. The tree is not for tourists. It is for the dead. Number 2. Manawatauhi/Three Kings Islands. 55 kilometers northwest of Cape Reinga, beyond the standing waves and the tide rips, lie 13 uninhabited islands. The Maori name is Manawatauhi, panting breath, referring to an ancestor named Rauru who is said to have swum here and arrived exhausted. The Dutch explorer Abel Tasman named them Drie Koningen Island on the 6th of January 1643, Three Kings Island, because he sighted them on the Feast of the Epiphany, the day the biblical three kings visited the Christ child. In Maori belief, the largest of these islands, Ohau, also called West Island, is the final glimpse of New Zealand that a departing spirit ever sees. After leaving Cape Reinga and traveling underwater, the spirit climbs onto Ohau, looks back one last time, and then turns away forever. The three kings were traditionally settled by the Muruwenua people. By the time the New Zealand government bought them in 1908, the islands had been uninhabited for generations. In 1889, sailors left goats here as a food source for any future shipwreck survivors. By 1900, there were 300 to 400 goats on Manawatawai. They tore the vegetation apart. In 1946, the goats were eradicated. But 50 plant species first described by the botanist Thomas Cheeseman in the 1880s have never been seen again. By the 1980s, 2 more plant species had been reduced to a single wild individual each. In 1956, the islands were declared a reserve for the preservation of flora and fauna. Today, they are a nature reserve administered by the Department of Conservation. To go ashore requires a permit. Permits are vanishingly rare. Imagine standing on the deck of a fishing boat 30 kilometers out from Cape Maria Van Diemen. The water is rough, internal tides, surface currents, the collision of 2 oceans. The three kings rise on the horizon as low, dark shapes. You will not land. Even seasoned divers who come for the crayfish around the islands rarely set foot on them. The plants Cheeseman described are still there, somewhere in pockets of bush no human has walked through in decades. Number 1. The Subantarctic Sanctuary. The most forbidden ground in New Zealand is not in New Zealand at all in the everyday sense. It is 700 to 860 kilometers south and southeast of Stewart Island in the Southern Ocean. 5 island groups: the Snares, the Bounty Islands, the Antipodes, the Auckland Islands, and Campbell Island. Together, they are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Antipodes Island sits almost exactly opposite London on the globe. Its Maori name, Mutere Mahue, translates to the Abandoned Island. It is the breeding ground for around 5,000 pairs of the endangered Antipodean albatross and for the only known breeding colonies of erect-crested penguins on Earth. The islands are all national nature reserves. They are protected under the Reserves Act, 1977. No one may land without a permit issued by the Department of Conservation. The permit specifies which island, which site, when, and for how long. Even overflight by aircraft below 3,500 feet requires a separate permit. Marine reserves now cover the territorial sea around the Antipodes, the Bounty Islands, and parts of Campbell Island, out to 12 nautical miles. The measurable scale of the protection effort is staggering. In the winter of 2016, the Department of Conservation dropped 65 tons of bait from 3 helicopters onto Antipodes Island to eradicate an estimated 200,000 mice. The Auckland Islands Marine Reserve covers approximately 484,000 hectares. Picture yourself on the deck of a small expedition vessel anchored off Enderby Island in the Auckland Group. The wind is constant. The sea lions on the beach below are hauling out, indifferent to you. Above the cliffs, light-mantled sooty albatrosses ride the updrafts on 3-meter wingspans. In the 19th century, this place was a graveyard for sailing ships. Castaway depots stocked with tinned food still survive in places, locked, waiting for a disaster that may never come. So where are the people who once lived in these places? The lighthouse keepers of North Brother. The Ngati-Wai families were forced off Hauturu in 1896. The 29 men of Pike River. The 22 who died on Whakaari. The 100-plus who vanished beneath Lake Rotomahana in 1886. Their names are on plaques. Their bones are in the rock, the water, the ash. Does anyone still remember? In a country of 5.3 million people, the answer is fewer every year. The forbidden places stay forbidden. The ground stays sealed. The wind keeps moving across the tussock, and the lights keep flashing on the rocks, and the spirits keep leaving from the tree at the end of the road. That was 15 forbidden places in New Zealand you will never be able to see.